Alrighty, well hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. I'm just putting up a quick video here, doing some work. I just wanted to show the, this is the logic that I'm dealing with. There it is. The ship is packed, absolutely packed. So, I'm working on the turrets. I'll just spawn it in. I'm working on the turrets. So there's two ways to design the turrets, alright, as I've discovered. So, you can use the pivots or the velocity pivots. So if you use the regular pivots, yeah, this is where we're at. I think it's done. I think the ship is finally done. All the turrets independently track. They have their own radar. So all you have to do is point at the object, and then you can turn on the radar tracking, and they'll track. It's all now. Now what needs to be done is like the final calibration of the turrets, and just making sure that they're reasonably in alignment. So x plus 1, x minus 1, y plus 1, y minus 1 when it comes to actually tracking and shooting. So that's the next part. Will be going back and trying to do some more shooting. Now I did try and fight there was an anti-air tank that was on the shore, and it ripped me to shreds. It absolutely ripped me to shreds. So the other thing that I'm going to need to do is the missiles that I have in here are laser guided, and they don't work. I don't know why. They're just very. I think that you can't adjust the laser, you can't adjust the band, and you can't adjust the XY. So it's all based on field of view. So if the missile fires and then for whatever reason it starts to veer off like it does, it hits the water and it goes down, the object that it's tracking is no longer in its field of view, so it's totally garbage, right? So now what I need to do is I just need to switch them over to radar guided, and that way when they're radar guided, it'll do the same thing like with the turrets. I'll fire in the general direction, it should pick up the object, and it should have a better time tracking it. That's all. I think the laser guiding is more, in my opinion, it's going to be more for RPGs and stuff, which we'll get into later on, because we'll have to do some land assault on the continents and stuff. So we'll definitely be getting into that. Yeah, so I think that's where the laser guided is for. You come over a hill, you see a tank, it's in view, and you fire, and I think that'll be probably better that way versus on a ship rocking and rolling around. Yeah. So every turret has its own radar, and they all track. Right. So what I was gonna say is going over. Oh, and then this. We have the push button for that, and then of course, if I turn it off, we'll just turn on radar track, boom, and then it'll track anything that comes into its view. Yeah, it took me a little bit to switch this around. So there's two types. You can use the velocity pivot and you can use the regular pivot. If you use the regular pivot, you can have a single radar on top of your ship that pinpoints objects, and you can have every single gun move and fire with that. Now, why is that? Because the X angle and the Y angle that the radar give you is a number, and that number can be read on the non-velocity pivots as the rotation. So if it gives you the X angle of 0.2, it'll go to 0.2 and it'll stop. Whereas if you're using the velocity pivot and it gives you a 0.2, the velocity pivot will continuously spin because it's giving that number is a velocity number, it's not an angular number. So that's the difference here. So what I need to do now, and that's why each gun has to have its own radar on it, because I'm using the velocity pivot. So what that means is the radar will track, and we need to get the X and Y value from the radar to 0. And once we're able to do that, then we're able to track. If we can't get that to 0, then the velocity pivot is going to continuously spin, right? So that's the difference. Whereas if these were robotic pivots, I could just use a central radar. So that's kind of where I'm at now. Is I'm just playing around with the gun. So it might be a day before I sail back out and actually engage in some more combat. Just because I'm trying to decide what's better for the ship, right? What would be easier for the player? It's obviously when you're in battle, it's not easy to run from station to station to try and lock on each target and fire. It would be easier to have 3 or 4 guns that you can control from a central location, right? So having said that, what that also means is when you're building these small guns, you can use the non-velocity pivots and it will work just fine. But when you're building these big guns, they have to have their own radar on the gun in order for it to track, because now you're using the velocity pivots. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. Thanks for watching, and like I said, it'll be a couple of days. Now I just need to redesign the turrets. Basically, it's switching out the velocity turrets and putting in the pivots, and then that way I'll be able to have a single radar. What I did is I used the gimbal camera here, and I pointed it at an object, and I was using that to test the turrets, and that's how I discovered the difference between the velocity pivot and the non-velocity pivot. And I'm just not smart enough to be able to, with the velocity pivot, I tried to do a greater than, less than. I tried to read the angle, because it actually gives you the current angle that it's at, and I tried to say, okay, if it's at this angle 0. The problem is you can't, once you read that azimuth angle, you can't tell the velocity pivot to turn to that angle and stop. Because there's just no way with, there might be a way. Maybe I have to do that with Lua actually. I guess I haven't really looked at it, but I didn't see any function blocks that would allow me to clamp that number or to read it and then clamp it, right? Because then you need on-off signals and all that stupid stuff. So it just became very complicated, and the only thing I could do is I could get this turret and it would just spin and spin. No matter what I did, I tried and tried. So that's what I figure. If you're building small guns, use the non-velocity pivots. You can have a central radar. It'll control all the guns. They'll move to a singular location and fire. So that's what I'm going to do for the small guns. And the big guns will just have to have their own radar until I figure it out. And I'm sure I will. Maybe a month down the road or something. What I imagine is I can take a Lua block and I can get all those numbers into the Lua block, and I can probably just write code that'll do, what I want for me. It can read the number and it can remember that number, and instead of having to use on-off signals and stuff, I can just write it. I think I could just do it in the Lua. I'll do some research and I'll do some reading and that. Yeah, and I'll let you guys know. So yeah, thanks for watching. That's going to be today's video. It is the weekend. I hope you're having a wonderful weekend. Yeah, spring is here. It's good. If you can, get outside, get some sun. Thanks, and I'll see you later.